Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rebound with Resilience, a podcast dedicated to raise your resilience, mindset, and mental wellness. And on this episode, I'm honored and humbled to be able to host a global speaker and a social media strategist. He has spoken in over 37 countries, with an audience as large as 10,000. He has hundreds and thousands of followers across his social media platforms. He's well-loved, well-known, well-respected, and most importantly, well-loved. None other than Eric Feng.
Hi guys! Oh my god, Kevin, you finally get to meet.
Yes! Thank you so much for inviting me to your studio. We took a field trip out today with our table.
I saw your Instagram story.
Yeah. And I'm just so glad to be in your office and be able to host you.
No, I'm glad. Thanks for this. And I think this conversation that we're about to have is extremely timely. Yeah. So I look forward to unpack this with you.
Sure. I spoke to you, you mentioned about social media. In fact, I would like to share how we first connected, if you don't mind, right? Just to give the audience some context. So I think it's interesting that I've always seen you on my recommended, because I'm in this space, like recommended feed and everything. I've taken a look. Some friends have tagged you on stories. So I've always known you, but I've never really delved into your content, like interestingly, because seeing your success plays out my insecurity. It's very interesting because my self-esteem is not at that level yet. And so we're going to talk about that later. It's very interesting.
Absolutely, yeah.
But because I had a pain, I had to eventually go and find out more because I want to grow my business. So I went to actually look at a video that you did on Facebook, on LinkedIn strategy. And I was blown away. I was just blown away by the value that you added, the free value you gave. And the way you speak, right, it's not over the top, but it's so relatable and it connects to me so deeply. So that's where I started to respect you. So from knowing to respecting. And then the one on, the customer journey, right?
Yes.
And the funny thing is I put it on Instagram stories at 1 a.m.
Correct.
I tagged you. I didn't expect anything. And Eric just replied me with a voice message and said, "Hey, I'm Eric. I'm not sure whether it's the real Eric."
Oh, yeah.
You get that a lot.
Well, I have 5 Erics that sound like me and look like me.
Yeah, so you get that a lot. But that was when actually from respected, became to love.
I get it. Okay, wow, I appreciate that. Appreciate it.
It's really something that you go the extra mile and you don't have to do it. I'm like a nobody, so to speak. Not yet, at least not yet a somebody, but the fact that you reached out to me and were so gracious towards me and of course giving me the chance to host you. Yep. I see my words are all jumbled up because I'm nervous. I'm really appreciative.
Yeah, I mean, you're most welcome because maybe of how I look at the world, right? I mean, I don't. And that's the very scary thing about human beings today, that we judge people according to how many followers they have. But so what? Just because you have 100K followers, then I have to treat you differently? No. I think the most basic thing is whether there's social media or there is no social media, we should still treat people with due respect. And I guess that's just what I'm doing. I'm just being a human being,
Sure.
Yeah,
I love that. It's funny that how we have, that's normal behavior, but after a while it becomes abnormal because not many people do it.
Common sense is not always common practice.
Yeah. Before I kind of go into the outline of the podcast, we are going to talk about social media and mental wellness.
Absolutely, sure.
In line with the theme. But I just want to really ask a teaser question, right? When you first started out, right? Do you imagine that you would actually have this following?
No, of course not. I mean, think about it. I was born in the 1980s. There was no social media. We have pagers. I don't even know whether you know what pager is.
I know my dad used it.
Oh my God, your dad. Thank you very much. I'm off. I'm done. So I was from the era where, we play with toys, we watch television, that's it. But I mean, I've always have a passion for teaching. That's something that I noticed looking backwards. Just think about it. When I was in primary 3 or 4, right? When people go back and play toys, I play teaching. So I would, like, my sister is my prop, basically. I would say, okay, you're there, you be my student, okay? Sure. And I teach her. Right. And that's how I play. Right. And then when I was in secondary school, I was from the morning class. So in the afternoon, there is like empty classrooms, right? And I would sneak in and teach myself. And that's how I revise my work. So I guess it's always there. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing because I've listened to a couple of your podcasts and previously you've also talked about this love for teaching that it's kind of just ingrained, being able to speak. So wow, but in any sense, I think today we are going to talk about that. So like your interests and your influences like growing up. And then of course, we're going to transition into like the mindset, the heart behind the strategy, like the principles behind the process and the practices. And then we're going to talk about social media and mental wellness.
Absolutely. Sure, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just begin with the early influences. And I wrote there how Eric Feng came to be. It's a bit odd, but yeah, so growing up, right, apart from say speaking at a very young age to a crowd, not to a crowd, to an empty classroom, what else were any specific incidents that actually shaped you?
Wow. Shaped me to be who I am.
Or rather, okay, maybe we start with interest first. Is there any other interest that you had besides like speaking?
Well, I think when I was young, I was impressionable, right? You want to be whatever that you watch. So obviously, I wanted to be a superhero really badly. I wanted to be a turtle because I watched Ninja Turtles.
Right.
I wanted to be a planeteer because I watched Captain Planet. But I really think that one thing that stays with me throughout is the love for teaching.
Right.
And there were people that were nurturing it. So when I was in primary school, it was my primary school teacher that nurtured it.
Yeah.
And then in secondary school, I had a teacher who caught me teaching myself. And she was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm teaching."
Yeah.
She said, "If you want to teach, then teach your friends." And then I started holding remedial classes
That's amazing.
for my
I saw
friends. Yeah, and then my tuition teacher found out about it and offered me a part-time job to be a tutor. So I think number one is I was very lucky that I discovered my interest early and I indulged in it. And there were adults that saw it and nurtured it along the way. And that led to whatever I'm doing today.
Sure. And you also mentioned that eventually when you went to school, right? There's no public speaking course per se.
That's right.
So you took computer science because you like because you like
Because I
gaming.
like computer games. Yep.
So you took, but you did mention very clearly that you couldn't compete with people because they were coding on a weekend.
Exactly.
And it's not something.
It was quite a funny. The only reason why I took computer science was because I have no idea what else I want to do, right? And I remember that there was one profound experience. It was Friday afternoon, and I was like, "Oh yay, weekend time, right? Yeah, let's go out."
Yeah.
And then my friends were like, "Oh no, we need to stay over the weekend to work on our assignments." I was like, "What assignment? There's no assignments."
Right.
They said, "Oh no, we created assignments for ourselves."
Yeah.
Coding assignments. And that was when I realized that, I'll never be able to compete with them, because I tell you, don't underestimate a person's desire and passion.
Yep.
Like when someone is interested in something and obsessed about it, that's when they're willing to spend time at it. And Malcolm Gladwell talked about it in this book called Talent Myth, that if you spend enough time at it, you will be a talent.
Yep.
Right? You'll be good at it. It's that 10,000 hour rule.
Sure.
And so that was when I realized that, no, I have no love for computer science. And I started asking myself, what are things that I naturally gravitate towards?
Right.
Well, number one, I love expressing myself.
Yep.
I love learning. Personal development was very big for me. And obviously, I love teaching as well. So I started asking myself, how can I put all these three things together? And eventually that led me to, volunteer in a student club. I started doing a lot of public speeches. And then I found Toastmasters.
Yep.
Then I realized, wow, you can actually win medals for speaking, because I suck at sports. So there's the only medal I won is participation medal for novelty races, okay? So I was like, wow, you can actually win prizes for speaking. And that got me hooked. And so I started working on myself. I studied overseas in US. Right. So I had this mindset that Asians will never be able to speak as well as US people, right? And so somehow or other, I don't know why, maybe I think I have good mentors. They always tell me this, that growth always happens in discomfort. Anything that scares you, go towards that direction. Your pot of gold is there. It's very opposite. When we were young, something scares us. Your parents are like, "Oh, okay, don't do it. But my mentors say different things. If it scares you, you're onto something.
Sure.
Because if everybody does it, don't do it, because that's the norm.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your passion is just. I can feel.
I was trying to contain my excitement.
Because over the camera is one thing, but face to face with you is another thing. It's just so contagious. It's crazy.
Thank you.
But yeah, you picked it up, and I think. But also you mentioned about how the US speakers, right? In fact, when I first started speaking, speaking is my passion as well.
Yes.
When I first started out, I imitated a lot of speakers.
Yes.
Like you got Les Brown, Eric Thomas, they're huge speakers, right?
Yeah,
they speak so
platform
much
speakers.
Resonance, like how hungry are you?
Yeah, and the
What's
DJ
your cause?
voice,
Yeah, what's your why? So I try to imitate them, right? The only problem is that I'm so small, right? The voice doesn't come out. Then it feels like a little bit off.
So here's the key. Don't imitate.
Yeah.
Because when you imitate, right, you're essentially just trying to be them. But guess what? There's only one you and one them.
Yeah.
Now, instead, model. There's a difference between copying and modeling. So, you see, anything that you like about that person, it resonates with you. So instead of trying to copy every single move of that speaker you like, ask yourself, what is the aspect of him that you really enjoy? Give it a try and internalize it, make it yours.
Right.
You don't have to be exactly like that person. The second thing I also realized when it comes to speaking or any form of craft is that sometimes you just got to play.
Right.
Play. I think that's something that we don't do very often.
Sure.
If you just go out there and express yourself and do something and then watch yourself. For us as speakers, the best coach is your video camera. Because the video camera never lies. So when you look at a camera, you ask yourself, what are aspects of yourself that you actually like?
Right.
Double down on that.
Sure.
Aspects that you felt it was not good, find ways to work on it. And in time to come, you just get better.
Love it.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what also I discovered along the way. Like people looked at me and said, like, Kevin, like your strength is in your sincerity and conveying it, right? You need to double down on that instead of trying to imitate someone else. And when you mentioned that in one of your videos as well, like that really resonated with me because at the start you were just going around.
And the thing is that it's very normal for you to want to model at the beginning because you wanted to, it's easy to pace yourself in running if you have someone to look up to in front of you, right? But at some point you need to start, running your own race.
Yeah. And of course, like you mentioned, even as you started as a public speaker, before you went into social media, I would just like to kind of explore that journey. Like how did that actually made from corporate training to writing a book with, I think, Rosie, I remember.
Oh, yes. Irene Ang.
Yes. Irene Ang. And then eventually transitioning into your niche now.
Okay, so obviously when I knew that I wouldn't make it as a computer science guy, I decided I better jump ship soon, right? So I asked myself, like, what is something that I'm good at doing? Sure. And what's a problem I can solve now? This is really important. A lot of us, we tend to do things because we're passionate about it. I don't think we need to monetize our passion all the time, right? So just because you enjoy singing doesn't mean you need to be a singer for two reasons. Number one is you enjoy it doesn't mean you're good at it, right? But the good thing is that if you enjoy it, you have a higher chance of being great at it. However, that alone is not good enough. You need to couple that with being a little bit more worldly and ask yourself, like, what problem can you solve in this world? What problem are you passionate about solving? And during my early part of my career, it was very obvious that because of my achievements in public speaking, so therefore people tend to come to you for speaking advice, right? So it was very natural for me to lean towards that direction.
Okay.
And so I was just spending 2 to 3 years, teaching about presentation skills. And I did not say no to any clients. I just said yes to everybody. And then I started asking myself, who do I gravitate towards? Like what sectors, which industries, what kind of customers do I enjoy working with? And I realized that I enjoy working with the people in the insurance sector. That's one of the, I don't know why, but it's just what I didn't buy insurance back then.
Maybe it's a passion.
Maybe chemistry or values. And I always say that the best analogy I can give you is like a buffet. It's very ridiculous for you to stand in front of the buffet table and ask yourself, I wonder what food is nice. No, and I can ask you, but it's never going to be accurate because it's a second party, right? You got to go try every single dish and then you will know what dish you like and then eat more of it. That was exactly what I did. So the first few years, it was all about exploration. I was doing all kinds of things, singing, acting, hosting, speaking, training, DJing, but back then there's no such equipment, right? I was doing everything that I feel like. And I feel that kind of lost it this generation. A lot of young people always ask me, what's the right thing to do? What if I tell you there's no right thing? It just feels right for you at that moment and it changes. So I feel that we need to experiment more, we need to play more, we need to explore more, and then check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, what do we like? And then do more of those things. And in the process, you'll get better at it. And that's when the money comes.
So I guess that's how you eventually, and also I remember one very striking thing you mentioned in one of the podcasts that I can't remember his name. There was a mentor that came to you and said that you have to be a somebody. Nobody will take notice.
Exactly. So that was in my early part of my speaking career where I realized that because I was really young and people don't give me the opportunity. They would tell me things like, you're too young, you need to have gray hair, white hair, or you need to be super seasoned and then come to the training world. But I love training, I love speaking. And you know what's the irony? It's like, if you don't give me a chance, then how can I get good? This curse, right?
It's like catch-22.
The catch-22. So I was very, very demoralized and I was very close to giving up. And then this mentor of mine, his name is Ron Kaufman. He was the godfather of the public speaking world. In fact, he set up the Singapore chapter for speakers. And he said to me, Eric, nobody will value you unless you're somebody. And I asked him, I said, what do you mean by a somebody? He said, somebody is a person that's well-known, well-loved, well-respected.
Wow.
And when you have
That's
all
very
these three
insightful.
things, you're well-paid. I was like, oh, okay. How do I do that? Now, traditionally, you can achieve the well-known, well-loved, respected by being on television, being on radio, right? But come on, if you have no compelling story, you're just a normal person, you don't have money to pay a PR agency, no one's going to know you. There's no mothership, you know? So,
back then it was very different.
exactly, it was very different. It was just Straits Time and Business Time, 2 papers only. But social media came about, right? So I was very lucky. I was at the brink where social media became popular, right? So I went into Facebook and I started putting myself out there.
Sure.
But I was not getting the results. I was not getting the followers. I'm not getting the engagement. And I came to him and I said, I don't know why.
Okay.
And that's when he said that most profound statement to me.
Right.
He said, Eric, perhaps the reason why people are not treating you as a somebody is because you did not even see yourself as a somebody. You know, we always talk a lot about personal branding and marketing ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? If you are not your biggest fan, then guess what? You're not going to have a lot of super fans because people respond to how you see yourself. Now, that took a lot of years to realize.
Oh, that is one thing that's really difficult though, because it's a lot of self-doubt and insecurity that we face.
Guess what? I guess this is one of the life lessons that we have to learn. You know, there's this song called Return to Innocence.
Okay.
And I think our entire life story theme is returning to innocence, returning to the point where we see the best in ourselves.
Wow.
Because only then you can attract the best in life.
Sure.
Maybe that's something that we don't just learn when we are 10 years old, but it's a lifelong lesson.
Sure.
Yeah.
Love it. And I guess the last question for this segment, right? I mean, for the listeners' benefit as well. Now, was there any fear when you pivoted? Because you pivoted multiple times, or 1, 2, 3 times. Was there any fear at that stage where, okay, I really built this, but I need to kind of, inverted commas, leave it to go to a different
Always.
niche?
You know, that feeling is like you paddle away from the shore. Like the further away from the shore, the more fearful you become,
Right.
because you kind of lost your harbor,
Yeah.
you know, your safe landing. But you know something, it's very strange, but maybe because I was young,
Okay.
and I didn't know what called fear is, right? I was just like, oh, fear lor, and then I can always go back.
Sure.
But I have to say though, as time goes, as you get older, when you have more to lose, it becomes a lot harder to pivot.
Okay.
You see, it's very easy to pivot a small ship, but it's very hard to pivot a big ship. So I'm going to be hitting 40 soon. And I have 12 years of work that I've done. It's a lot harder to pivot versus when I was only 2 to 3 years in the business, I pivot every day, you know, just to make sure that I get some success.
Sure.
So if you guys are young, that's your luxury. You have no liabilities. I mean, I'm not trying to make you guys think that, you know, being young, life is easy. I'm not saying that your life is easy. I'm not trivializing things.
Okay.
But I'm saying that when you're young right now, you know, you're still living under your parents' roof. This is the best time to experiment. This is the best time to play. You don't have to be right. You just got to learn.
I love it.
Yeah, there's no such thing as failure. It's just feedback. And if you fall, just make sure you fall forward, right? Do all that in your 20s. Then by the time 30s, different. 30s is where you build.
Okay.
Right? Because you kind of know what skill sets you already have. You already have a certain network. 30s is not for experiment. 30s, you already know what you're doing. You build. Now, 40s is the next level, scale. So that's how I look at it. So 20s, you play. 30s, you build. 40s, you scale. And then depending on how successful you are, 50s, I think it would be a great time to mentor and, you know, help the rest of the world. Or who knows? They say that 50 is the new 20. So 50, you restart again.
Well,
You already make your pot of gold, man. You can restart. And then, depending on how long you live, you can loop many, many times.
Sure. I love it. I'm just getting inspired listening to you, and we still have quite some time to go. That's cool. So I think that's a good transition into the next segment, which is, we talked about how you came to be. Let's talk about the heart and the mindset behind strategy. You know, because you talk a lot about strategy, and it's so solid, the strategy. I guess we won't go into it. If you're interested in that, please check out Eric's social media. All the strategy
Instagram.
is all there. But I want to talk more about the heart, or rather the principles that underlie the strategy. Like when people come to you and say, Eric, tell me what to do, right? What are some values or principles that have to underlie that strategy?
I think most importantly, the people that come to me, they are all entrepreneurs. And let's just say that, you know, the amount of money you make is simply the market's feedback of your value. The amount of money you make is simply the market's feedback of your value. So if you want to make a lot of money, you have to deliver a lot of value. Now, then the next question is, what is perceived as value? It's problem solving.
Okay.
Right? It's about what problem you want to pick. See, Facebook's making a lot of money because they solve one of the biggest problems, which is connecting people from different faculties and colleges. Jack Ma, one of the most successful guy, he is highly valuable because he bridges the Chinese businesses with the world. So the bigger the value, the bigger the problem you solve, the more money you make. So I think that's the first thing we need to get clear of as an entrepreneur. What's the value that you're providing? What's the problem that you're solving? And who are you solving it for? Once you get that clear, which is clarity, then you pick the platform, in this case, social media, that can help you communicate that value. Then that leads to communication skills.
Sure. Love it. And what about also the values that's underlying in terms of, because when I mean, there are many people out there teaching social media, but what gravitated me towards you is the values underlying. It means like the love and that connection and that, like, it's not just about you, it's like how you really give so much.
Okay, and you see, isn't that awesome? You know, and you see, there are a lot of social media strategies out there, and they all have their own following, right? So I always feel that like building your brand on social media is like dating.
Okay.
Step number one is you need to have clarity of who you are and where your strengths are and your positioning, right? You know, what are you here for a long-term relationship or you just want to fling? And what kind of values do you stand for? Because if you're not clear, then you can't communicate that. And if you can't communicate that, you can't attract the right people to you. Right? So the worst thing to do is, let's say you like Gary Vaynerchuk. And you go like, I want to model after him. And you become like Gary Vaynerchuk. But maybe you don't share the same values as him. And you have a problem. Because you're going to start attracting followers that values Vaynerchuk's values. But that's not you. And then you'll be having to pretend all the time. So I think that once you're very clear about the problem that you want to solve, the audience you want to serve, you know, step out there and be your own kind of beautiful. Do it your way. Do it your style. And then see who gets attracted to you.
Okay. Love it.
And double down on that.
Speaking of that, right, I think people do subconsciously, they want to put themselves out there. They want to, showcase their value. But I think you coach people from all walks of life, right? What are the common self-limiting beliefs that holds them back from communicating that value?
I think the biggest one is the fear of criticism. The fear of judgment, the fear of looking stupid in front of people. In a nutshell, people's opinions. I think that's one of the biggest problems.
Okay. And so what advice would you have to kind of build a resilient mindset around to solve that self-limiting belief for people? They come to you and say, that, okay, I'm having this fear of judgment. Like, is there anything that you share with them?
Well, I'm going to give you an analogy, right? Do you sometimes have fear of judgment
of course.
when you do videos?
Yeah, of course, now.
Yeah, like you do a podcast, right? Good.
Yeah.
Now, what if I take a gun right now and I point at your head and I'll say, you either speak and be judged or I'll shoot.
I'll speak.
Why? Because you value your life more than people's opinions. That's how you deal with opinions. You just got to find something more important and put it side by side to it. For me, it was education. Because my background was speaking, right? And I had a lot of fear back then, in speaking in front of crowds, especially because I have this mindset that I'm Asian, people might not understand my English, and I was speaking to predominantly a Western audience. Then one of the mentors said to me, Eric, when you're up there on stage, do not seek validation, seek education. Let me repeat that, it's very important. Do not seek validation, seek education. So whenever you're speaking, doesn't matter how they feedback to you, you're there to improve and get the best out of you. In other words, what drives me is mastery more than criticism or feedback.
Sure.
And that's how I got good. And you know what's the best part? And when you get good, the amount of criticism just gets lesser.
There's a lot of focus on yourself and convincing yourself that you're there first and foremost for yourself to speak to.
And that will be your reason, but it may not be the other person's reason. So you got to find another compelling reason on why you still want to do it. Because if you can't, you always fall back down to your fear.
Okay.
You see, that's why I always tell people, if you don't have a good reason to do something, you always fall back to your excuses. Sure. Right? So the question I think everybody needs to think about is, why do you want to put yourself out there? Like, some people are sick and tired of being invisible. Some of them are sick and tired of having to be worried and anxious all the time because they cannot get enough sales appointments. Some of them are sick and tired of their profession being ruined by shenanigans out there that misrepresent the entire industry. I do not know what's your poison, but pick one. Pick one that motivates you so much so that people's criticism and validation not that important to you anymore. I think that will really help any one of them, any one of your followers listening to this right now, get a breakthrough.
Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing that. It's just heartfelt, like straight.
And can I also share one more point that will also help you? So number one is you got to give yourself a compelling reason why you want to do this, and that reason has to be much bigger than validation. It could be, for me, mastery. It could be for you, self-expression. It could be for you, your baby girl that was just born. You're doing it for her. You can be the enemy of the entire world, but you would fend yourself, you'll fend your baby girl. Then that's your reason. And the second one is you need to have a stronger relationship with yourself. The reason why we seek validation is because we don't validate ourselves. That's why we need other people to tell us we are good. Because you know what? We don't believe we are good. You see, let me ask you a simple question. Do you need me to validate that the chair is real?
No.
By the way, Kevin is sitting on a chair right now. For the whole entire time, he never asked me, hey, Erica, is the chair really there or not? You sure, right? The chair, no need.
Right.
Because you are certain that the chair is there, you have an experience of that chair, right? Now,
Yeah.
it's the same thing with our relationship towards ourselves. Have you been spending time with yourself? Have you been spending time acknowledging yourself, loving yourself, appreciating yourself, celebrating yourself? Because if you don't, guess what? You'll be subjected to people's validation.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just like how if you're clear of your gender and someone says you're a different gender, you wouldn't question it.
You won't question it. You look down, you know already what. Right now, I don't need you to tell me, because what you tell me is an opinion, but what I see is a fact. Fact always beats opinion.
Right. And then that principle applies for whatever that you're trying to put out there, right?
Everything. And that's why it's very important. You cannot want to go on social media to be validated, because why is it there are celebrities that will kill themselves, even though they have huge followings? Because the basis of them going out in the entertainment world is to validate themselves. And you know how bad things are sometimes, right? The criticism can be so bad. Like there are 10 people that compliment you, but that one person that says something bad, you pay attention to that one bad one. Because the truth of the matter is that's exactly how you see yourself anyway. Wow. That was just a confirmation.
Okay. I think that's a really excellent transition to the final and probably the most important segment. We want to give it the most time, right? Social media and mental wellness. Because we kind of give a really good prelude into that already, about
I think so. And I was just telling Kevin, like in preparation for today's podcast, I did an Instagram story asking people, how many of you are very stressed and anxious about social media? And we got like 97% of them, voting for that.
Oh, that's a high percentage.
Absolutely. And I feel that, the reason, we will talk about why people are stressed, but it'd be very cool for you guys listening to us or watching us. What do you all think? Are you all stressed, anxious about social media? Let us know.
Okay. So first question on this, right, is why is this topic something that is important for you to talk about?
Because we know logically that as an entrepreneur, you need to be on social media because attention is everything, right? The most important game you need to win is actually the attention game, because you can have the best products in the world, you can be the most knowledgeable person in the world, but if people don't realize that, then it really doesn't matter. So people knowing you is important. Now then ask yourself, where are everybody spending their time right now? Social media. So logically, it makes sense that if you want to do well in your business, you got to put yourself out there where the attention is, right? So we have no problem with that. But the problem is with all the fear, the anxiety, the stress, the doubt. And where all that comes from? It comes from a certain limiting belief or a certain emotion they have towards social media. And that's why we need to fix it. Otherwise, businesses will not flourish.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that the fact that you are a social media strategist, but when I first talked to you, you also acknowledged that could lead to a lot of downsides if we're not careful about ourselves. And you mentioned that social media is like high school.
Yes. I gave him an analogy. Right? It is amplified. Think about it. In high school, you want to be loved, you want to be popular, you want to be included, you want people to pay attention to you. Isn't that what social media is all about as well? Right? The only difference is when you are in high school, if people don't like you, it is only limited to your class of 40. But now on social media, if people don't like you, it could be the entire world. So everything is accelerated. Everything is amplified. Another one, if you have a bad time in school, right? But you can always hide in your home after that. And you're only going to school from 9 to 3 o'clock. Today, social media is 24/7.
Sure.
Right? So everything about high school that you don't like, it is accelerated and amplified right now on social media.
And that's why it's so important to talk about it, and I think you talked about stress earlier. Before we talk about other people's stress, could I also ask you, personally, because I think a lot of people, I mean, at least for me, at least, we sometimes put you on a pedestal.
Yeah.
That you know,
Yeah,
everything's
it's true.
there, it's perfect.
Yeah. That's
But-
that's so wrong. It's
but-
like a biggest misconception ever.
So I want to ask you, right? Do
Sure.
you personally face any stress from being an online person?
100%. Let's just say this. Everyone feels stress. If you care enough about your job, you will feel stress. The question is how much? And is that stress pushing you forward, or is the stress causing you to freeze up and not do anything about it? That's the question. So everybody feels stressed. The better question to ask is, how do you deal with it? Because the people that deal with it well, do well. The people that don't is the one that's crumbling.
Sure. Okay. But I mentioned also, like when I chatted with you, you mentioned that because you're an online personality, sometimes there is a need to pander. Then you gave me a need about JJ Lin.
Yes. Okay,
thought
so
you
a bit of context, right? So I was telling Kevin, Derek, I don't know who's the guy.
Yes.
I was telling Kevin that while sometimes creating content can be quite challenging. Like compare myself, years ago where I have no followers to right now the followers I have, I realized that I feel I have a lot more hesitation in creating content. Like I think a lot more before I put a piece of content out there because there are a lot of people that are going to watch it. Like in the past, you don't worry about that. You only got one people watching it, one person watching it. Who cares? I just put it out there.
Sure.
And so there was a period of my life where I stopped producing content, or I was really, really hesitant in putting out content out there. And then one day I was invited to JJ's concert, and something that JJ said to me made me tear and really helped me got a breakthrough. This is what he said. He said this to us. He said that I've been in the singing career for 15 years, and part of the music process is we figure out what kind of genre of music that you guys like, and then we go produce it for you. I mean, it's very logical. It makes sense, right? But you see, for some reason, that process kills him in terms of his creativity and self-expression. And it got to the point where he got so stressed up and that he lost his voice.
Right.
And that was when he panicked because, a singer losing his voice, it's like you're losing your only rice bowl. And he said that there was a very dark period of his life where he was reflecting, contemplating, and he realized something, that music to him is a form of self-expression, right? It is for him to share a part of himself to the world. It's not for the world to tell him what he should be expressing. Right. Because it's like you telling me how I should live my life. And that's not the way life should be lived. And that was his moment of breakthrough when he realized that music is an accurate, honest representation of who you are at that moment. So every piece of content that you create, if I translate that to what he says, is an accurate, honest representation of your intellect at that moment, of your revelation at that moment, of your emotion at that moment. It's not going to be perfect because we are evolving. But haven't you seen your content 10 years ago and right now? And you would think that, 10 years ago, my content is horrible. But back then when you produce it, you never think it's horrible because it's at your level of evolution. And that's how JJ wrote this song, which is called 不为谁写的歌, a song that I don't write for anybody else but himself. And I tell you, when I heard that, I teared because everything that he's feeling is exactly how I felt. I felt like all of a sudden I have to pander to my audience. I have to create content that's popular. I felt like because I teach social media, every single piece of my content must go viral. And when you set that kind of crazy expectations, it does something to your mental wellness. Yeah, so I think JJ saved my life, man. When I heard that.
Compelling story.
Exactly. And I told myself, you know what? I'm not going to create content for anybody. I'm going to create content that it's valuable, in my opinion, and I'm going to put it out there, and anybody that likes the content, comment on the content, these are the people that appreciate it at that moment. That's great. That's my followers.
I get emotional listening to you, actually. I'm sure people listening will also, because as budding content creators, right, we do face that a lot. Because you're trying to find yourself still.
Yeah. And you know what? Finding ourselves, it's probably going to be a lifelong journey, right? And isn't that awesome? I mean, if you can find yourself in one day, then what are you going to do with the rest of your life, right? And we grow. So I think, to you, Kevin, number one is you need to be very clear about why you're putting out content. And that goal cannot be about seeking validation, because validation is something that goes up and down like the stock market, which means that your reward will always go up and down. But you can set a more tangible goal, like I want to put out content that makes a difference in somebody's life, right? And that we need to remember to seek education, not validation.
Sure. I love it. That's amazing. In your observations, right, apart from being seeking validation, what are some other common sources of stress that you notice when people go on social media?
Spending too much time on social media, comparing their behind the scenes with people's highlight reel.
Yeah.
You see your friends, wow, celebrating, drinking champagne, having a good life, closing cases. And then you look at yourself and go like, oh my God, I haven't eaten my lunch. I have so little money in the bank. I'm not having a good relationship with my wife. I'm struggling. And then you start to question yourself, that maybe it's true that I'm really not good enough. Right? But it's not accurate. Right?
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's the second one, the comparison. By the way, comparison is a joy killer. Have you ever bought something nice for yourself and then you see someone wearing something even nicer than you, right? Or, okay, I'll give you a simpler example because a lot of your listeners are in schoolgoers, right? Yeah. You take an exam paper, you look at your score, yes, 78 upon 100, you're so happy until you notice your friend got 91 upon 100 and all of a sudden, that 78 sucks.
Yeah.
That's the obvious thing about comparison. Comparison kills joy.
Comparison is the thief of joy. In fact,
absolutely,
See, it's crazy because, in fact, what you talked about is also research in when people get their bonuses. And it's exactly what when someone else gets a higher bonus, all of a sudden their bonus doesn't seem. But if they get a lower bonus, but they're the highest in that department, then they feel great. Yeah,
it sucks. And that's even the people that feel great. I'm sorry for you because your basis is wrong. That there's two ways to be the tallest building, right? Number one is to be the tallest building, or number two is to destroy all the other tall buildings. I want to share a parable with you, which I think will help everyone listening to this because that parable helped me a lot. Right? So this is a parable. Parable is like a story with a hidden lesson. The talent is called the 5 talent.
Sure.
So one day, the master is about to leave home to a far, far away land, and he called his 3 servants. The first servant, he gave him 1 talent. Right, in the olden days, talent represents your gold, right, your wealth. And then the second servant, he gave 2 talents, and the third one, he gave, I think, was 5 talents. He said, my faithful servants, go and multiply it, right? Take care of it. The first servant was very afraid of losing that 1 talent, so he buries it under the ground. The second and the third servant did everything they can to grow that talent. One day when the master came back, went to the first servant and said, so what do you do with the talent I gave you? He said, master, I was so afraid that I'll lose it. I'm afraid you will scold me. I hide the talent underground. Nah, this is that 1 talent. And the master was furious. He said, you wasted that talent. You could have grown the talent. You hid it underground. With that, whatever that you hide, I'm going to take it away from you. So he took that 1 talent that he hid in the ground. Went to the second guy, and the second guy said, oh, master, you know what? You gave me 2 talents. I grew that 2 talents. Now I've got 4 talents. And he said, well done. I'll give you 1 extra talent. The third one says, master, you gave me 5. I grew 10. He said, well done. You are my good, loyal, and faithful servant. Now, by the way, he said the exact same thing. You are good and loyal, faithful servant to the guy that grew from 2 to 4. What's the lesson? Number 1, the talent represents everything that you've been given. What do you do with it? Do you hide it? Because you are fearful of how people might think about you, or you're fearful that that people will judge you, or you use the talent for good and you grow it. And guess what? You notice the master gave the same compliment to the second guy and the third guy. The master never go, I give you 2, you become 4. That guy got 5, become 10. Yeah. The master was equally happy because every one of us are given different talents. You don't have to compare. The only thing you need to compare is what have you done with it. If you want to compare, I'll let you compare. Compare you with the old you. As long as you grow, you improve, you have evolved, that's real change. Right? People play their own games and battles. People run their own races. It's not for you to judge and compare.
Yeah, I've heard that story so many times. I think it's from the scripture as well,
yes.
Right? But this is hands down the most impactful anybody has ever shared that story.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
because it impacted me.
Yeah, because the essence is there. It's
so no longer do I go like when I produce a video and I look at somebody else, produce another video and it was so good. That's his talent. God gave him more. But even God is fair, man. I mean, just look at the guy on the beside you. God is fair, right? So everybody has different talents. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what's your faith. At the end of the day, you got to ask yourself: did you make full use of everything that's given to you? That's the most important question to ask.
Sure. Wow, so we really went into comparison. In fact, interestingly enough, right, when I put that poll out on social media
Yes.
and on my Telegram group, right, I mean, from research,
Yep.
right, the most common stresses with social media is comparison and self-esteem issues. Addiction is one, and then the last one is fear of judgment, or we call it cyberbullying. But I put all these options, right? I mean, I'm going to edit it in, right, on social, and 80% of people said that comparison affects them the most. Comparison, lowered self-esteem. And the funny thing is, what's the most powerful thing to me now, sitting, listening to you, right? Is that whatever that you just described, right, was me when I looked at your content. That's why I was so fearful of approaching you, because looking at your success, right, because of my lack of self-esteem, looking at your success actually amplified my insecurity. I'm like, wow, Eric's there, and I'll never be at Eric's level. And it's crazy. It eats you up alive.
Yeah, and because, you know why? Because you use the wrong metrics of success. The metric of success should be, look at Kevin 5 years ago. Are you improving? Are you growing?
Yeah,
Are you evolving?
sure.
Crazily, right? Then you should be happy. That's it. That I should compare with myself 5-7 years ago. Now, I can use everybody else as a benchmark, that I can aim for that. But at the end of the day, you have to play your own game.
Yeah. And I think also, just for some research context for the listeners, right? Because this, I think, whatever that content creators are facing will probably be similar to me. And like research shows that when you have, like you said, a good relationship with yourself, your self-esteem is there, right?
Yes.
Then I look to you as a source of inspiration rather than a threat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is what I am feeling now, instead of feeling it as a threat. So it's so amazing that process of me going through, right? And I hope that people can also go through that process for themselves.
Which is why I think that we should spend more time in self-reflection. We should spend more time asking ourselves what is our own definition of success, and not let society tell us what our definition of success is. And that your success should never be at the expense of somebody else, and your success should never be because you are better than somebody else. That kind of success, right, it's going to make you very miserable.
Sure.
Some days you might be happy because some days you're on top, right? Yeah. But one day you'll be down and then you'll be disappointed.
Sure. Wow. I guess I could ask the last question with regards to social media, right? I think just to summarize that previous part, it's just about, to tackle the issue of comparison is really understanding that the grass is not greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. Understanding that you are given your own talents, you need to use them and not compare.
You need to be more self-focused.
Yeah.
I think that the key is we're always looking out for references. We need to look inwards for references, which is why I feel that we need to spend more time with ourselves. We need to spend more time validating ourselves. We need to spend more time understanding where our strengths are and nurture those strengths.
Sure.
Yeah, be more inward focused if you need to. Right? I'm not asking you guys to stroke your own ego, but I'm asking yourself to use personal growth as your best metrics of success.
And I think one thing also I would like to highlight, you did mention that you be very careful with the information that you put into your brain.
Yes.
You have a morning routine and night routine where you're very conscious about. Could you share a bit more about?
Well, I would say that, because of social media, right, you can follow almost everyone. And the best analogy I can give you guys is that, would you allow someone to put trash in your house? Like, Kevin, would you allow people to put trash? Yeah, good. Then why do we allow people to put trash in our head? In the form of the feed. Right? So you need to go scroll through your Instagram feed, your LinkedIn feed, your Facebook feed, and ask yourself, are this content wholesome? Does this content edify you, encourages you, inspire you? Or the content makes you jealous, anxious, stressed? Maybe you're just not ready to consume that kind of content. Delete it off. Remove it. I think curation is one of the most important things we need to do. Yeah.
Last question with regards to social media before our final segment.
Sure.
When we talk about social media, right, naturally, we will always have this, there's this Netflix show, what was it? I can't remember, about the ills of social media.
Social dilemma.
Social dilemma. Yeah. So we always talk about, it seems like we always talk about social media depression, social media anxiety, mental health, social anxiety. But what's most striking to me, right, is that you use social media to improve the mental wellness of people. And that is something that I want to talk to you about, because when I look at your highlights, it's so... I just feel fulfilled.
Oh, really?
And I want to talk about this. How have you used social media?
Well, first of all, understand that social media is really just a tool. Right. It's a sword, right? Because Dungeon Dragon fan, anyone Dungeon Dragons fan? So the power of the sword lies with the hand that wields it. Social media is really just a tool, right? You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. So I would say number one is you have to, have a very good healthy relationship with yourself so that you're not subjected to people's criticism or validation. Number two, you need to have a huge, immense clarity of your strengths and your values so you know who to attract and you know what are the qualities you can cultivate so that you can attract more success. So all this is self-work.
Yeah.
Right? And then the next one is intention. When you go to social media, what's your intent? Is your intent to seek validation, which is what we already established, and you should not use that as an intent. But if the intent is for you, to do business, to serve, then sure, then set that as an intent. Then don't take things too personally.
Love it.
Yeah.
And it's rare. It's very rare that, because you teach business, right?
Sure.
But you take time out to have a HT sessions. You even call it HT.
Yeah.
And there are people that cheer because they feel so impacted by your encouragement to them. There's a lady that was suffering from, I think, some
depression.
issues with her health. Yeah. And then you ask people to support her.
See, Kevin, you must understand this. Love or anything that you give must always come from an overflow. If I'm poor, I can't give. If I'm poor in spirit, I can't give. If I'm poor in emotions, I can't give. That's the reason why before you focus on trying to help people, help yourself. Because everything I'm doing didn't come from I'm trying to help so I show people that I'm very helpful. No, it came out of overflow because I've been helping myself, I've been feeding myself.
Wow, that is such a stark paradigm.
That's why
I would never have thought of
really?
it that way.
That's why Sundays, right? I don't do social media. I do post things on social media, but Sunday I spend all my time doing my favorite things. So that I fill myself up, so that I'm ready on Monday to Saturday to serve. Right? And that's what I think all of us should do. And you can't give from an empty well. So if you guys don't feel like giving, don't feel bad about it. You're not ready to give. Don't try to give. Don't try to be generous. Give yourself first. Like spend time with yourself. That's why I believe in morning routine and night routine, because imagine if you reserve your first hour, I call it the secret hour, for yourself. You know what? You're already sending a very strong signal to the universe that you matter, that you're the most important person in your life. That's why you give your first hour away. And when you do that, right, it has deep impact in everything that you do. You start to respect yourself more, which means that people will start respecting you more. You start to be more loving and generous to others because you already fed yourself full.
Right.
Same thing.
Wow. I think that we have come to the end of the podcast because Eric needs to go into a...
Oh my God.
But before we end, I usually have this segment that's unique to my podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
you didn't tell me that.
Yes, it's a surprise segment. It's called 10 questions.
Okay,
and
let's do it.
Quick fire questions.
Okay, quick fire questions. Let's try.
Okay, so the first question is, what's your strongest driving factor?
Influence.
If you can spend a day with anybody in the world, who would it be?
Jay Shetty.
Ooh, interesting. Why go global?
Because I want to be mega influence the entire world.
Love and service is a big part of your brand and to you as a person, right? What does love mean to you?
Well, that one takes time.
No worries. No need to be quiet. It can be a bit longer.
You say quick fire.
So it's 30 seconds.
The one word answer.
30 seconds.
Okay, what is love to me? Wow. I legit don't know. Hold on.
I managed to stun Eric.
Yeah.
It's an
Ask
achievement
the
today.
question again. Ask the question again.
So, love and service is a big part of your brand and you as a person, right? But what does the word love mean to you?
Well, I always think that love, it always starts with self-love.
Okay.
Seeing the best in yourself, believing that you can be the bestest version of yourself. And in you doing that, people get inspired by it.
I love it. You've spoken and met people from so many countries, so many cultures. What is one commonality you see among them?
People love humor.
You.
Yes, so funny stories really work wonders. And I always feel that my shortcut to making people fall in love with me is to tell stories that make them laugh. Because we all laugh at the same things.
Interesting. Can you share one interaction or moment with a fan or a follower that you remember?
Oh my God. There was one. I was in, I think it was Malaysia, giving a speech to about 6,000 people.
Okay.
And my mentor told me this. He said, Eric, you have a calling, that your calling is to encourage, to edify people. So look out for people to edify. And these people that you are supposed to encourage are not the one that will rush to take pictures with you and sign books with you. They are the people that are outside, fearful to reach out to you.
Wow.
So I pay attention to that all the time. So I would like take photos, but I will notice like in the far fringe, is there someone that's shy or wanted to approach but they're not approached? And that day I saw one, the lady was crying. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, was my speech that bad? That she cried. So I said, can I pause the photography and the signing? And I went to her and I said, hey, is everything okay?
Yeah.
And then she said, hi, Eric, I felt that your entire speech was a confirmation of what God is saying to me. And I'm so thankful for that. And I just feel very loved by God that God sent you in my life. And I was like, oh my God, I was so happy. And I said, can I hug you, and I give her a hug. And I said, I want to pray for you, right? And I mean, prayer is essentially just speaking, confessing positive words on a person. So you don't have to be a Christian to pray, you can be anything. Sure. You can still pray. So she told me what's her issue. And I said some positive words to her and I encouraged her. And then we took a photo together. Now that speech was 2014. Okay. It's been 7 years. As it turned out, that lady was actually a very powerful leader in the insurance company. She's like the top. Really? I didn't know that. She was a director. I didn't know. But every year she would tell people about the thing I did for her. Wow. And that was when I learned something that, you know what? Immortality, it's not about living forever. Immortality is about doing something so impactful to a person's life, you live forever in theirs. Wow. That was my takeaway.
I find it hard to continue, but I have to. Just a few more questions. What advice have you received that has impacted you, changed your life?
This one, that until you see yourself as a somebody, everyone will always treat you as a nobody.
Do you have any advice for content creators who are facing burnout and self-doubt?
Go consume wholesome content that make you laugh again. Go consume wholesome content that makes you smile, makes you cry, makes you feel inspired. Feed yourself first. Rubbish in, rubbish out. Value in, value out.
What does resilience mean to you?
Resilience is about falling down and picking yourself up as many times as possible until you achieve that goal.
So the last question. I feel like I subconsciously answered, but I'll ask it anyway. What do you wish to be remembered for?
I wish, oh my God, I'm getting goosebumps for that question. I was just thinking about that question this morning. If anything were to happen for whatever reason, I wish that people would say on Instagram or on social media that something I said, something I did, gave them hope, gave them encouragement, and gave them the energy to be the bestest version of themselves. And I think if I'm in heaven one day and I hear people saying that, I'll probably be crying. So that day will be raining.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to host you.
Thank you for asking me all those questions.
Yes, you have definitely, the last question actually resonates with me because I will write something about it.
Oh, okay. I hope not too soon.
No. I mean, just in general. So, I think that comes, I just, where can audience find you? I guess the plug.
Oh, I'm everywhere on social media. I'm everywhere on social media. I think my favorite platform is Instagram. So you guys can look me out on Instagram. Eric Goes Global. DM me. Let me know that you have heard Kevin's podcast, and I would love to connect with you.
Yeah. Oh, once again, thanks, Eric.
You're most welcome.
With that, I guess we have come to the end of today's podcast. It's been I find it hard to find words to describe it. Just connect with us if it's inspired you, connected to you in any way. Subscribe for future podcasts and take care of your resilience and mental wellness. All right? Okay.
Bye-bye.